That's a reach. Welcome to That's a Reach podcast. The goal of this podcast is to answer young adults' questions about theology, life, and the gospel from a biblical standpoint. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to That's a Reach podcast. We have the whole crew here today.
All four.
All four of us. Okay. This is episode
3.
Season 2, episode 3. We've got a few questions for you. Starting off with question number 1. What advice would you give for someone who grew up outside of the church as they tried to become a part of it? Sometimes it seems like church culture sort of makes it hard for people.
Get out. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Fly right or get out. No, I think really there's two parts to that question that kind of, they speak to two different things that people struggle with. Just the first one, just in general terms, how someone that grows up outside of the church, how do they become integrated into the church? I think it's kind of the same answer for anyone. There's layers and structure for how church, well, there should be. I know for us there is structure for how church discipleship works. There's the large group things that happen on Sunday mornings. Then you get slightly smaller groups and you go to Sunday school. Slightly smaller groups from there going into life group, and then even smaller groups from there. Once you have established relationships, then you start to have opportunity for good friendships and discipleship where you're getting poured into or pouring into someone else. And so it's usually as a brand new person to a church, especially if you're coming from outside the church, kind of start in the big area with the intentionality of moving yourself to smaller and smaller groupings. It's the thing that trips up anyone is when they get comfortable and they just sit in the large group on a Sunday morning and they don't engage those that are sitting around them. They don't look for opportunities to get invested. And it's not an exclusive church thing. You know, kind of any grouping you go into, if you're going to start a new hobby or you go to a new school or whatever the case is, if you don't put yourself in the vicinity of other people's actions and circles, then people aren't going to go out of their way. Normally, people don't go out of their way to snag new people. Yeah. But the church, for the most part, most people that are invested in church realize that there's going to be new people walking in and they're going to recognize, I haven't seen that person before. I want to make sure that they are getting connected and involved. And so people will make that effort. That's the first question. Do you have anything to say about that?
I would say part of this is don't believe the lies in your head.
Yes.
Because there's part of the question in and of itself makes an assumption that the way that you feel about how you're not getting connected is like accurate. Mm-hmm. But some of that is just the insecurities everybody feels anytime they're doing any social thing, right? Part of that is thinking about the fact that no one else thinks, like no one who's been in church culture is like, that person's not, they're not from around here. No one's like looking at you thinking you don't belong or whatever. And then in that same way, everybody else, whether they are in the church or out of the church or how long they've been, is having the same thought. Mm-hmm. So there are kids who grew up in the church and they still are like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. Yeah. And that even can just be switching churches.
Yeah.
You can be totally invested in a church culture, switch churches and be like, oh, no one here knows me or likes me or whatever. And a lot of that is a tool that the enemy uses just to make you second guess and not get plugged in, not get involved. And so I think one of the things you have to do is kind of have to choose to shed some of that social anxiety and just say, the Bible tells me I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be plugged in. I'm supposed to be a part of this. So I'm going to go do it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get involved. And it's funny because I've seen people come in and they sit in the second to last row and they don't pray with anybody at the end of our young adult services, things like this. And then they're just kind of around and then they wonder why they're not plugged in. And then I've seen people who are brand new, who within 2 weeks are literally just walking around introducing themselves to people. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, everyone just thinks, that person's been here forever. We know them so well. And it has nothing more to do with that. They decided. They were like, I don't care. I'm going to be here. I'm going to get plugged in. So here we go, right? And they embrace kind of that social awkward, just, I gotta do it. I gotta talk to people, and that could be harder for introverts, sure, but you still have a choice in the matter.
It's also realizing that not like no one's out to get you. Like everybody wants you to be there. And so it's like when they come in and they want to have a conversation, it's like whoever you're going to go introduce yourself to, they're like, oh yeah, a new friend, you know? So
yeah. I mean, even the most socially awkward person, when you, like for me, if I end up talking to them on one of our worship nights on Tuesday, it's not like, man, I've never thought, man, I wish they weren't here. Because like that's anyone within the church community that is chasing after Jesus, when they see anyone, whether they're awkward or you can tell they're going through some stuff in their life or whatever the case is, in my mind, it's always like, man, I'm so glad that they're here, because this is where they need to be to get over their shyness, to grow in the Lord, to overcome whatever sin difficulties they have going on in their lives. It's not like, man, I can't believe so-and-so is here. He's such a sinner. Where else would a good church person want them to be? You know, like, go back out and sin. Don't be in here. You're bringing down the vibe. Like no one thinks that. And like Taylor said, that's the tool of the enemy to make you think, oh, I don't deserve to be here. But that's exactly the point. He's just twisting the truth of the matter that you don't deserve this type of opportunity and relationship. And he's trying to make it seem like, yeah, get out of here. It's like, yeah, you don't deserve it. How cool is it that God offers that to you? That friendship and community is a God-given good thing that you get to be a part of. Yeah. So don't listen to the enemy's lies on that.
That's the cool thing, is like the power of Christ is the only power in the world that can unite so many different people. Yeah. And so if you're coming to church and you're not being able to get involved and relate to people, then are you chasing a different thing than everyone else? Like, what's your goal? What are you coming here for? So everybody else is getting together because we're all uniting around who Christ is in our lives. And so you've got to be chasing that. And once you do chase that, you'll have a desire to talk to everybody because you want to talk about that with everyone, and they'll want to talk to you about it back.
Yeah. What was the second half of that question?
Sometimes it seems like the church culture sort of makes it hard for people to do that.
Do you think that is true, or is that just the reality of any group, any circle?
Okay, that's a good question. I think in general, it's just the reality of any group. I think that it can be very true of church culture. One thing, and again, this is partly just across the board, but a lot of groups have, like, if you will, subcultures have like language, like lingo, right?
There's Christianese.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it can be hard, but again, now we're back to, how do you get fluent in a language? The best way is immersion, right? The best way is to just keep asking questions. And so it's like, okay, you're new in church. You keep hearing this word, sanctification. It gets thrown around all the time. You're like, what the heck is that? Well, then ask somebody. Say, what is sanctification? And one of two things is going to happen. Either the person you ask is going to go, I have no idea. And you're going to be like, I'm not the only person that doesn't know. Or you're going to ask somebody and they're going to go, well, it's this. And they're going to explain it to you. And then you're going to be like, cool, now I know, right? But there's no loss. And it's, again, we're back to it's the doubt in your head that makes it to where, like, that people will know, like, I should know that term. Like the pastor says it in the sermon all the time. And it's like, that's actually why I try to explain it every time I say it in a sermon, because I'm like, I know like a third of the room still doesn't know what this means. You know? But the thing is, just be, hopefully you go to a church where it's not made harder on purpose. Because that can happen.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
does exist. But if it's not being made harder on purpose, then there's a good chance that it's a hesitation in your own head. And the only way to get out of that is kind of, for lack of a better term, like by force, to kind of push yourself and just be like, you know what? I have no idea what this is about. Right. Can somebody tell me?
Yeah. Any healthy church community is not going to operate in an exclusive club type of mentality of like, you better understand the lingo before you come asking questions. And like you said, more often than not, you're probably going to ask somebody who understands, in theory what the thing means, but then they're like they'll stumble over and be like, I don't really know how to explain it, which is good. They need to be challenged. Everyone needs to grow in understanding of those things, not because you need to be able to answer the questions on the pop quiz at the end of church, but it's because understanding those big concepts that have the kind of Christian lingo to it, it helps you to better understand what God is doing in our hearts and our minds. So it's a worthwhile thing to to gain that understanding, not so you fit in, but so you have more opportunity to grow in your depth and understanding. Yeah. So
that's a huge thing. I mean, church Christians, the religion of Christianity gets a bad rap because of judgmental and all that kind of stuff. And people walk into churches and they feel like they have to be a certain way in order to be involved in the community. And again, unfortunately, sometimes that is due to people who call themselves Christians.
Yeah.
Going out and spreading a wrong, false understanding of what it's about.
Examples of whatever it is.
The real Christianity is all we want for you is to ask, because we want that for you. It's for your good if you just ask these questions. It's fine if you don't know the answers. I didn't know the answers when I walked in here.
The whole judgment thing also has become an easy catchphrase. We know, we have a lot of our young adults work in environments where somebody's always like, well, Christians are so judgmental. And one of the things that Abigail, my wife, tells people is when you hear that, ask them, can you give me an example? Because sometimes they have a very real experience and you can say, hey, I'm really sorry you went through that. And you can show them the opposite. But the vast majority of the time, they're like, well, it's just like you see it on like Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, so you personally have never been judged by a Christian, but it's just that Christians are judgmental, you know?
Yep.
Well,
what the next one?
Before we move on, I am now suddenly just doubting everything that's happening. And since we fired our engineers and then hired them to be over here, I'm going to go double check that everything was turned on. Yes, red light. Yeah.
Okay.
I was starting to panic and I was like, I don't remember pushing the buttons.
I don't want to talk I'm glad you did that. You can edit.
Yeah, we can just...
All this.
Yeah.
We'll fade in and out and then come back to question number 2. But I was
sorry, we had technical difficulties.
I don't want to sit here and then I should have stood up. I should have stood up and checked.
Yeah, and then we talked for 30 minutes.
Yeah. All right, it's all recording. We're good.
I was like, at first you said, I'm doubting everything, and I thought about this conversation.
I quit!
You guys just talked me out of everything.
Christians are judgmental, and they're sitting right beside you. Your question, too.
Because I was looking over there past you, trying to not be awkward. I was like, can I see the red light? Is the red light on? Oh, God. Okay.
All right.
Question 2.
Yeah, question number 2. How do you measure the health of a church?
With a yardstick.
Well, going back to the thing we were just talking about, there's lots of things, but one of the things is the community and the way that the community acts and reacts to new people and questions and those types of things. There's going to be a obvious healthier version of that. So you can kind of see the health of the church through the love and interaction of their community members. One of the things that I talk a lot about when we're talking about launching new ministries and things like that is just the idea of vision, trying to figure out where we're going and why. But one of the important elements to that is not just having a cool, catchy vision phrase, but like what's the value and the measure that we're looking at. And so as a person that's within a church community, what does a healthy church look like? And I would say generally it's a church that is multiplying disciples. Think about the Great Commission. Yeah. That's what we're called to do. Is there baptisms happening? Are there new disciples that are being multiplied? And are they being sent out to go and teach others likewise? If that's the case, that's kind of our main value marker of what measures a healthy church community based on Scripture.
Sure, and I think that's definitely true. It's also maybe like big picture, if you will. Because one of the things that I've seen, because it's hard to like look at just maybe the microcosms of like one class and see that on just like a day-to-day basis or a week, Sunday to Sunday basis. Whereas you should, over a period of time, you should see all that. I think that there's something to be said for something that you can see week to week is the hunger for the word. Like, do people actually want to hear the word? Are they there because they are there for the sermons? Or are they there because you're doing something flashy? Right? Like, are they there because there's something trendy going on, right? That's one thing. And then the other one, something I've noticed that I think shouldn't be underrated is how do believers deal with conflict?
Yeah.
Like, you want to see a healthy church?
Absolutely.
What happens when there's conflict? Do people seek to reconcile with each other, both sides? Or do people seem like try to divide into their groups and win the fight?
Right.
And what I've been really happy with in general is that a lot of times that I've seen it just in the young adult community, drama or some kind of conflict of some sort is that people are seeking to reconcile. They're not trying to make it worse. They're not trying to get people on their team.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I would be willing to say I've never seen a community this big with healthier breakups. Because we have breakups in our community. They happen every now and again.
Yeah.
And they're not dramatic. They're not people taking sides. There's not a lot of fighting. As a matter of fact, we've had people who were very upset about a breakup only to have their communities come around them and say, okay, but that's not what's important right now. Like, I know you're sad. I know you're upset. I know that this hurts, but what is God teaching you? And that to me is so huge, because instead of it just being like, everyone grouping up and picking sides of who was right and who was wrong, even if the person involved directly is trying to do that, the community themselves won't let that happen. And that to me, I mean, just the way again, I think that you're absolutely right in a big picture. There's a big picture of disciple creation.
Yeah.
But the micro level of that on a week-to-week basis is the difference between what's our focus on and what are we doing with the thing that distracts us from our focus. So the word and the conflict that distracts us from the word,
Yeah.
So what do you say to a person who's like, well, attendance is the only measure of a healthy church? And where people are like, well, clearly there's thousands that go there.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I've always said there's growth out and there's growth deep, right? And if you will grow what you have deeper, it naturally attracts people to it, because other people are attracted to people who are really displaying Christ, right? So if you grow deep, you will eventually grow out. If instead you focus on growing out, what you have is something really kind of far-reaching that's fragile and
house built on sand almost.
Yeah, and so you'll see churches, young adult programs, all kinds of stuff. They get a lot of people in the room, and then it topples, it crashes at some point because it's easy. It's unstable. One of the big measures for this is, I've heard of groups that they were bringing in 100 new people, like a church bringing in 100 new people a week and losing 75. It's like, okay, you're like, I'm glad you're somewhat growing, right? But why are you losing, three quarters of what you're bringing in?
Yeah.
And that's not growing what you already have deeper. And the tendency, right, is I got to get the chairs filled.
Yeah.
But if you'll take whoever's in the chairs and make them stronger and stronger and stronger, people will naturally be attracted to them.
Right.
They will fill up more chairs. You take whatever you get, you keep going deeper. That's how I will, I don't want to be like arrogant in this, because I'm just saying it in the sense of like, I think we did this well.
Yeah.
Which is that Reach has never been a place where that's so cool and trendy that we just had tons and tons of people showing up. But over time, we've only ever grown by 10 or 15 over several months, right? But they stay.
Yeah.
Right.
We grow by that much, and then we stay that way.
Yeah.
And that's because we take in whoever we get and we take them deeper, and that's all we focus on. And then they inevitably bring in some more people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're preaching the word, we're focusing on the Great Commission.
And we're teaching them how to handle conflict, how to be real with each other.
Well, to also point that to scripture, like, what does Jesus say in John? And then what does John say again later in like 1 John? Like, how does the world know that we're Christians?
By the way we love each
how
other.
we love one another. How do the world know that you belong to me? By how you love one another.
Well,
and
there's multiple places where it says like, I can't think of the exact passage where, like, for instance, Paul's like, why are you fighting just like the world?
Yeah.
Like, why are you fighting with each other just the way that pagans fight with each other? And it's like, we're supposed to look different,
Yeah. And that's going back to even the first question about even to just dissuade somebody's fears about getting into a new church and feeling, as an outsider in church culture, it's like, that's the ideal of what church culture should be like. That they're known by how they love one another. And if that is a mark of a healthy church, then that's another reason to not fear jumping into a new church community, because if they're following the Lord, as best as they can, they're going to love you even in the midst of your trials and your junk in life. And so it should keep us from worrying about that so much. And I think you're absolutely right. Like using that example of what our young adult community looks like versus some of the stories that we've heard of other ones. And that's just one of those things. And it doesn't just end with young adult community, thinking of all ages and stages of what they look like, by the way that we love one another and are okay when our preferences aren't met. Because going back to the gospel and to scripture, Paul, is telling the Philippians to have, that mind among themselves where they are counting others' needs more significant than their own. That is a practical way of showing the world that I love these other people in a Christ-like way that's different than the world. Not because I have to in order to deserve to be here, but I am compelled to by the Spirit growing within me. And I don't remember what the question was about.
How do you measure health of a church?
There you go.
So there you go.
Those things. Yep.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Loneliness in young adults, mainly for men. How do you encourage young men to find friend groups?
Yeah. Going back to even the first question of just putting yourself out there when there's other things going on, you don't have to wait on, like your Cinderella waiting for them to bring you your glass slipper and invite you to the ball. Like go out and put yourself out there and just
show up.
Yeah.
Honestly,
show up.
Showing up is one of the biggest ones. Cause like we do, for instance, we do men's events like once a month.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, do you want to build new friendships? Then be at those things.
Yeah.
Right. That's huge. And then the other one for me, what makes men feel the most alone is that they, even if they go out and they play basketball every weekend with a group of guys, but that group of guys doesn't know what they're struggling with, they still feel alone. And guys are way less likely to share what they're struggling with each other. And I think that's obviously there's a stigma to that, and it has to do with masculinity and stuff, but that's not Christianity. And so ultimately it is not just being with guys, but telling those guys the truth. Hey, like I'm dealing with something and I'm not even dealing with it well. And it sucks. And I need you to know that. I need you to pray for me. I need you to, hear me out as I deal with this thing. And it's like the more guys that you'll do that with, the more connection you'll have with them. And by the way, when you do that with guys, they do it back.
Yeah, it's contagious.
Yeah. You tell a guy like, hey, I'm struggling with this, man. Like, and then what's going to happen is that guy's got something pent up deep inside of him. He doesn't want to tell anybody. And as soon as you say it, it's like, well, dang, dude, you know what? Here's what I'm dealing with, right? And they'll tell you something back. And then guess what? You just made a friend in a real way. You'll stop feeling lonely because you'll know. I've been in situations where the worst thing in the world is feeling like you're going through something and nobody in that given room knows what you're dealing with. Well, sometimes all it takes is you could be in a room with 50 people and something happens and you look for the one face in the room that has heard the pain or the thing you're dealing with, and you look at them and they look at you and that person knows what I'm dealing with, and that's all it takes. And so, well, how's anybody to know what you're going through if you don't tell anybody? You have to tell somebody. Yeah.
And to reciprocate that and be that for somebody else.
Yeah, be available for them.
Because you pouring into somebody else is very satisfying. Like it's what we were created to do, is to be known and to know other people in a real way. And for them to feel like, as the question was saying, like to feel connected. Or what was the question again?
Yeah, how to find friend groups, how not to be lonely.
Yeah. So being available, showing up, like we said, those are the practical things, but then even just being vulnerable and then being available for someone else to be vulnerable with you. And going back to what I said on one of the earlier questions about the different levels of church community that we have, if you only ever find yourself in the large groups that's easy to get lost in. Like where if you're a person that does get anxious about those things, you will maybe intentionally or unintentionally not even realize that you're holding back and you're kind of trying to hide in the shadows a little bit. So push yourself into the smaller groups because it's going to force you.
Because this is like obviously the theme in this podcast. One of the things that you have to think of is you do not have to beat this entire, mountain obstacle of getting plugged in and having friends in 1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But here's the other thing. You do have to do something every week.
Yeah.
And so it's what happens is people show up and they sit there and they don't talk to anybody. And then they think, well, I don't have any friends. And then they think, well, I should just talk to I should just go every week and I should try to talk to people. And that feels overwhelming. And it's like, okay, how about this? Show up and talk to one person and really get to know them. And then that's why we provide, for instance, what we do with the prayer time afterwards. Tell the person that you end up sitting across from the truth. And how about this? Don't pray with the person that you already know super well. Go pray with somebody you have never sat with and never had a conversation with and tell them the truth about what you're struggling with. And watch them do the same thing and love you and you love them and you pray together. And then guess what? That was 1 week. You had one good conversation, met one new person, got a connection with them. Now go home, let your little introvert battery recharge, and come back next week and do it one more time, and just keep doing that. It just takes one,
Well, even through Tuesday night reach and Sunday morning, we give them 2 opportunities to do that.
Yes.
So it's like 2 real connections you can make a week.
And the Sunday school one actually makes an even better point. It's kind of like how much does this matter to you?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you don't come to Sunday school, if you don't come to the service events, if you don't come even to the fun events, then when you come and you don't join a life group, right? And you're not getting discipled. And then you come and you say to me, I just feel like I'm having so much trouble getting plugged in. I'm going to ask you a sequence of questions. And it's going to sound like, do you come to Sunday school?
Yeah.
Pray with people you don't know? Do you get discipled? Are you in a life group? And if you say no to all those things, I'm going to say, okay, it is your fault that you are not connected.
Yeah.
You're not doing any of the things that you need to do to get connected. You can't just show up at Reach on Tuesday night, sit in the back of the room, pray with somebody you already know, go home and be like, I don't know, I'm not plugged in.
And the last question to those series of questions is, when you do those things, are you actually being honest and talking to people about real things that you're struggling with?
Yeah. If you always keep the mask on, even though you do the effort, you're still not going to be known, and it keeps it surface level in your heart and mind, and you're still going to feel alone.
And here's the wild thing. So many testimonies of people pair up with someone that they haven't met before. And guess what? The other person starts sharing what's going on in their lives, and it's the exact thing that you're going through. And it's like that bond is established all the time.
Has been crazy is the amount of people who are really plugged in at Reach who remember the very first person they prayed with.
Yeah,
I do.
They're like, that's the first person I prayed with at Reach. And the fact that we've been doing it long enough that almost everybody has a story that's like, yeah, that was the first person I prayed with. It's like, that tells us this works. So if it's not working for you, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, for sure. But in all that, I don't want people to feel that we're like beating them, where it's like, come on, dummy. I mean, a little bit,
but we're pushing you for your benefit.
It's just see the illogical nature of the thing of, I don't feel connected. Well, have you done any of these things? No. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't expect us to like invite you to the ball, Cinderella. Like, come on,
let's do this.
There's a flurry of activity going on around you. Just step into it.
I just heard somebody recently was quoting a family member as saying, I guess a discipler is not going to come to my front door.
Oh,
it's like, no, they are not. You have to go do something to get discipled.
Generally, yes. Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's just, and honestly, half of the battle is just being in the places where we all are.
Yeah. That's why, like with the young men at Reach, they're like, man, I wish I knew older people. It's like, did you know that there's 100+ old dudes that have breakfast every week? You're invited.
And I tell guys, they're like, well, how do I get discipled? And it's like, okay, how about this? Go to men's prayer breakfast, sit at a new table every week, and ask a random dude that's 20 years your senior to go to coffee that week.
Yeah.
Do that 10 weeks in a row, and I bet one of those guys you'll make a real connection with, and you can get discipled.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be surprised if it didn't happen that morning.
Yeah, right. Right.
No one of those guys.
Especially walk up to one of those tables. You know, we do the same thing all the time. We go to prayer breakfast, and then we sit with our peers. It's like, are you trying to get discipled? Don't sit with your peers. Go sit with some guy that looks like, he might have been in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And ask him to go to coffee.
Yeah. Even just yesterday at prayer breakfast, some of our young adult dudes were standing there looking around, and they're like, well, so-and-so's right here. And I go sit with some old dudes you don't know. And they did. And they talked for forever. So it's like, there. Exactly.
Good. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. That's all that we have for today. That's the last question. All right. Thank you for listening. If you have any of your own questions, send them in. That's episode 3 of season 2 of That's Reach.
Nice.
Break.
Done.
Thanks for joining us. We hope this episode was helpful in your daily pursuit of Christ. If you'd like to get a question answered, see the link in the description. That's Reach. I think that was good.